I knew that I wanted to go back to work. I mean, I had had some really interesting, very high responsibility, high consequence jobs with some, Fortune 500 companies, and I loved that work. But the idea after going through what I had been through of going back to work in a normal 9 to 5 setting, like I sort of describe it as shell shock. There are people, and this is of no disrespect to our, military service members because I have not lived through that, but I sort of describe it that way. They come back from war and they're shell shocked. They're looking around at people just going about their everyday lives like everything is fine. And they just cannot imagine ever getting back to that place. And that's sort of how I felt. I had lived through something so traumatic, and I was like, I don't see how I could possibly go back to work in an office, have water cooler chat, talk to clients like everything is fine. It's not fine. There are so many people still going through the nightmare that I just escaped.
Welcome to The Change Effect, the podcast that helps you turn life transitions into powerful new beginnings. One story, one shift, one breakthrough at a time. I'm your host, Noelle Van, an author, leadership coach, and change strategist who spent years in corporate America helping innovators and leaders break through barriers to create success on their own terms. I now work with women to step into change to create a life they love. Whether you're putting yourself at the center of your own story, redefining success, or making a power pivot in your life, career, or business, you're in the right place. Each week, we dive into conversations with trailblazers, changemakers, and everyday women experiencing the ripple effects that come from overcoming the fear and doing it anyway, providing actionable steps, practical strategies, and a whole lot of fun along the way. So if you're ready to step up and become unstoppable, buckle up and let's get started. What if the hardest part of change isn't making the decision, but learning how to hold your ground when everything around you feels like it's designed to make you question it? Today's conversation is about a kind of strength we don't talk about enough. The quiet, steady resolve it takes when the stakes are high and the path forward is anything but clear. Kat Climaco built a career in marketing and business, working closely alongside her husband and operating within what, from the outside, looked like a successful and established life and career. But behind that image, she was navigating something far more complex, a relationship with patterns of control and confusion that could no longer be ignored, leaving her with the difficult realization that staying in her marriage was no longer an option. But ending the marriage wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a deeply challenging chapter, one that pulled her into a high-conflict family court system where she had to learn in real time how to advocate for herself and her son, document what was happening, and fight for protection in a system that doesn't always recognize the more subtle forms of harm. That lived experience is what shaped the work she does today as a high-conflict divorce, custody, and co-parenting coach. She now supports protective parents navigating these highly complex situations with a blend of practical strategy, court awareness, and grounded emotional support, so they can show up steady, clear, and credible when it matters most. Today, we talk about what it takes to transform a life-altering experience into purpose-driven work, why traditional paths can feel misaligned after deep change, and how to create a career that honors both your experience and your evolution. This is a conversation about protection, power, and what it means to stand firm in your truth when it matters most. Kat, it is wonderful to have you here with us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Noelle.
Kat, I feel like I always have people kind of start in the beginning in terms of sort of whatever you want to share about your background to kind of ground us, and then we can start talking about your journey.
Sure. So I'm from Cleveland, Ohio originally. Grew up in an Italian family, very hardworking. My dad was an attorney, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, homemaker. And I grew up in a family that had a lot of love and from the outside looked really, really perfect. And then from the inside, there was definitely some dysfunction, as there are in many families. But, I experienced in my formative years what I would call narcissistic abuse from my dad, which definitely shaped my life growing up, my view of love and what kind of behavior was acceptable and not acceptable, what love looked like. And, I also had this really amazing role model in both of my parents. So, just like with most people growing up, there was some confusing dynamics, right? But I started my career as an art teacher. out of college. I was a K through 12 art teacher, and then I went back to school and got my master's degree in interactive media. Fell in love with that sort of agency world, right? Digital strategy, social media, agency life. Ran the brand social media account for Stars Entertainment for a long time, and then moved into digital marketing for TD Ameritrade. And from there, my ex-husband poached me to work at his software company, which is sort of what you just mentioned. I am mama to an amazing 7-year-old boy. He's just my joy, and I just love what I do. I live in Denver, Colorado. We're big outdoor enthusiasts, ski enthusiasts, and so
You're in a great part of the country.
yeah. Yep.
I love it. I love it. So, okay, so you I love your background, by the way. The fact that you got to work with kiddos in creative, that's just really fun.
Yeah, I loved it.
You get poached to work at what was the company that you worked with your husband in? What was that? What was in or do we
Basically, it was just a boutique software company. It was him and a few overseas designers and developers. And when we started dating, he showed me the products he was working on. And there was one in particular that based on the work that I was doing, I thought, oh my gosh, I can use this in my work. This is so valuable. And so, when I told him all the potential of it, he said, I think you should work for me. I think you should quit what you're doing. And I think that you should work for me. So, yeah, that came along with the promise of, hey, let's travel the world for a year and be digital nomads, which was another one of my dreams. And so, it was sort of an offer I couldn't refuse, which is, yeah,
Yes. Sounds compelling. Sounds very compelling. Okay,
yes.
so when this is about how many years ago?
This was in 2015.
Okay, okay. So you move over and what's the role that you play? Did you wear many hats in that job? I
Of
think you said you
course.
did everything.
Yes. Yeah, he had 2 software products, one that he worked on, independently, and the other one was mine.
Oh,
He
nice.
basically said, "Get this product ready to launch it, do the whole thing." So I took the entire product, the design of it, I did the UX, the marketing, everything, right? I'd had a master's in interactive media, so it was right up my alley, and I loved it. It was so much fun. It took me about a year to get it really, really compelling. We had a big base of users, and this was a really different product. People were paying for a web browser. Our biggest competitor was Google Chrome, and so
What was the name of it? What was the name of the product?
it's
Can you
called Ghost Browser.
Ghost Browser. Okay. I remember looking it up, but I can't remember
Yeah,
what the name of
and
it was.
Opera is what I use now, and it's basically a clone of Ghost Browser. I don't know which one came first, but, you know,
Now,
Opera
is this
wasn't
the
doing
kind of
that.
was this the kind of browser too that like you can't trace back what you're searching, kind of that type of
It
thing?
had some privacy stuff involved, which, was a big part of it, but, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so you are working in the mix. Is this like a startup situation too? Was it
This
okay.
is less than a startup. This is me and my husband working out of a home office. We have designers and developers overseas who are on different time zones, and we are just like super scrappy. He's funding the whole thing personally. I mean, it was
Like
really,
you were
really
doing it.
scrappy.
You were doing it.
All of
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, so how I mean, I know that there was sort of a there became a bit of a shift at certain points, but just kind of walk us through that. Your eventual exit from that situation.
Yeah. So it was a very quick romance. We met in August of 2016. We got married in August of 2015, and we got married in July of 2016. So it was quick, but I was 35, he was 41. Sorry, I was 32, he was 41. And so it was, we were older. We knew we wanted to have kids. And so we kind of got started right away. And we worked together for about almost 5 years
Mhm.
through the whole journey of, getting pregnant and having a baby. I was still working as literally a brand new mom. When you own your own software company and it's literally like a 5-person team, there's no maternity leave. That doesn't exist. And so I was still working through all of it. And when my son had just turned 1, it was like the height of the pandemic, March of 2020. I realized I was in an abusive marriage. Yeah, and, they say with all narcissists, they're wearing a mask really tightly. They hold it really tightly onto their face, and typically with all narcissists, once you have a baby and you're fully integrated, tied to them, trapped, as some people would call it, that's when the mask falls off. And it wasn't until I had my son, I started to see glimpses when I was pregnant, but it wasn't until I had my son that I realized who my husband truly was. And so, we went through the whole pandemic, and in May of 2020, I told him I wanted a divorce. And I worked with him all the way through, I think it was June of 2021 when I
Yeah.
finally quit. So, about a year after I filed. And it was when he asked me to do something illegal that I was like, okay, this
Yeah,
is
it's time.
untenable. I got to go.
It's time. Now, Kat, let me ask you this because this is just also for listeners that might, I mean, what you saw, how you said you started to get glimpses of things. Were there particular signs? I mean, just to kind of give an idea of what that looks like, what kind of triggered for you, like, this is not healthy?
Yeah, gosh. Again, it
And maybe
happens.
maybe it's more cumulative too,
Yeah,
right?
it happens gradually over time. If the abuser in the beginning of the relationship treated you like they do when you're finally ready to leave, you would never stay, right? So
Right.
in the beginning, everybody tells the story like I did. It's a quick romance, it's a whirlwind romance. I got swept off my feet. He was so charming. Let me take you on a, trip around the world for a year. Come work with me, all
Yeah.
this stuff. What I realized is he was slowly over time making sure that he had control over every aspect of my life, where I worked, who I saw, what I was doing. And I think, again, the pandemic is really what just blew the lid off. The pandemic was a really good excuse for him to really tighten the control. My family was being super careful in the pandemic. My sister had young children and she lives here too. My parents were being really careful. My parents never got COVID at all. He said that they weren't being careful enough. And we had a young son. And so I was forbidden from seeing my family. And then it got to a point where I was almost forbidden from talking to them, even though they were being so careful. He told me, "Your family isn't being safe. You're not allowed to see them. Neither is our son. You can go on Facebook and meet people that are being as careful as we are. Find who you like, and I will screen them and tell you whether or not you can bring our child around them." And I just remember thinking, how, even if this person told me that they would be this careful, this is a total stranger. How can I trust this total stranger over my own family? And this is really classic narcissistic abuse. So some of the biggest signs of narcissistic abuse, that charming stage, that whirlwind romance at the beginning, and then slowly over time, controlling every aspect of your life and then eventually cutting you off from the people that you love. When you feel isolated and when you are isolated, you're the easiest to control. This also includes lack of empathy. This includes the narcissist wants to make you do everything. So I was doing 100% of the childcare. I was still running the business. I was grocery shopping online. I was cooking, cleaning, working, doing everything when he was literally just binge drinking and chain smoking. And it was, I asked for once a week, 2 hours in the afternoon to myself so I could go for a walk, and he made such a big deal out of it and told me that I was so selfish and then the day finally came where he was supposed to watch our son for 2 hours so that I could get a break, and he came up with some excuse. I can't do it. I just remember being so confused, and one of the key components of abuse is if you're confused, you're probably being abused. The
That's
confusion.
powerful. Yes.
Mhm.
Because you don't really think about that in the moment at all.
No, no, and somebody explaining the dynamics of what was happening on the outside wouldn't have clicked, but the confusion. I don't understand. What just happened? I thought this
Yeah.
person is supposed to love me. Did I ask it wrong? How come there's always so it's the million questions, and the
Yes.
abuser is usually projecting onto you. You're so selfish. You're this. It's the verbal abuse, the emotional abuse, the control, the isolation. These are pretty key patterns.
Here's something that comes to mind.
Yeah.
So you were with him for, the 5 years that you were working together.
Mhm.
Do narcissists do they translate that approach to other people? So, like, in other words, did you see that in with clients? Did he d like, was or is it literally just within the relationship you're in with him, so it's this myopic sort of thing happening?
You know, so some people say that, narcissists can't help it, so it's not their fault. I think it's exactly the opposite. They know when they can be abusive and get away with it, and they know when they need to have the mask on. It's all theater, really. So, like, I have a good friend who was a longtime user of my ex husband's software product before we even met. And he used to ask my sister, "Hey, is Kat okay?" And she was like, "Why?" And what I came to realize is that his customers hated him and he had a reputation for being really abusive. I did not really see this until, again, I was already pregnant,
Mhm.
but he was terrible to his clients. But he had such like a niche product, which was totally separate from what I was doing, and I don't wanna talk about the product at all because he's very retaliatory.
Mhm.
But he had a niche product and he could charge a lot of money for it. And, the users in that space knew that it was the best product. And so they just put up with it. But like we built a home and he was so abusive to the people who built our home, refused to pay them large sums of money at the end. But then again, in front of our friends, he was Mr. Wonderful. He was super dad. We would go out in public and he was like super dad in public. He was so kind and loving in front of family and friends in public. Eventually, he just stopped pretending with my family. But I loved going out in public because that's the version of him that I fell in love with. That's
Right.
the person that I wanted, and so I was always wanting to go out, right?
Yeah.
Let's go
Yeah.
out and hang out with friends because then I get the version of you that I fell in love with, and it was behind closed doors that he was really abusive, which is typically the dynamic, and abuse victims don't wanna badmouth their partner because there's so much hope that, "Oh, if I just say the right thing, or they'll get help, or they'll change," and so you don't wanna badmouth the person that you love in
Right.
the hopes that they're gonna change, and so, yes, I saw glimpses of it, but only until after I got pregnant, um, and then it was like all bets are off.
Yeah. Well, and I know, and we know this from the pandemic, that a lot of things amplified during the pandemic. Let's just put it that way, right? I mean, if you're in
Yeah.
a not so great relationship, I'm sure that that would amplify because you're now around the person 24/7. Although it sounds like you guys were in pretty close proximity in your work and home too. But so this is May of 2020, and you decide, okay, I'm getting into filing for a divorce. So you decide now you leave the company a year after that, which by the way, that's like tough because now you're in the mess. But are you still living together or are you not living together? Okay. So,
No,
okay.
well, I moved out eventually, I filed for divorce once in May of 2020, and he convinced me to try again, and so then I filed again at the end of August, and he would not I mean, we were multi-millionaires. He would not give me any money to leave until I fired that lawyer and got a new lawyer who got me out of the house. And so, November of 2020, I moved into the house that I'm in now. I've been here since this is my safe haven. This is my sanctuary. And yeah, so from November of 2020 through May or June of 2021.
Nice.
Mhm.
Okay. So you decide to leave. Then you leave the organization, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And how did that go? Like, what was that? Did you move to something different? Did you like where did you? Because I know what you do now, but what was sort of that bridge?
Well, he put me under a performance review, which was really interesting. My sister's used to be in the corporate world, and she was like, "Tell me," it was basically just an excuse to be highly abusive, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so fascinating. If it wasn't so painful, it would
Yeah.
be even more fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't work for a long time. Going through a divorce with a malignant narcissist, especially, is one of the most traumatic experiences a person can undergo. Like, it's up there with cancer and soldiers at war, I would
Yeah.
say. And so I just knew, like, I'm going to go back to work, but I need to take a break. And he was causing so much chaos on a day to day basis that it was basically a full time job to manage him. My son was going through the ringer. It was just mass mayhem. And it sounds like what chaos could he possibly inflict? You guys are divorced. You're living in separate homes. For victims of non physical intimate partner violence, that's basically all forms of abuse besides physical violence. The abuse does not end when you escape the relationship, it intensifies. It
Yeah.
was chaos on a daily basis. He was hacking my accounts. He was refusing to drop my son off for my parenting time. It was just crazy. It was crazy. So I knew that I wanted to take a break and I thought, I'm going to take like a 6-month break. I have enough financial resources for that runway. I'm going to take a break. And it was about 2.5 years uh, that I ended up taking a break just because of the chaos. I had to go back to court. We settled for equal custody. I said, if you take breathalyzers during your parenting time so that I know that our little boy, who's can't even talk yet, is safe, I will agree to 50-50. I will waive alimony. I don't want money. I just want to know that my child is safe. But I had to go back to court and request sole decision making, majority custody, and the court did award that in June of 2024 based on the very, very high legal bar of child endangerment and domestic violence.
Whoa.
Yeah. So
Wow.
it was as I was getting ready for that hearing, which was in January of 2023, that I took the high conflict divorce coach certification program offered through One Mom's Battle. And I graduated in October of 2023. And that program really informed how I approached my custody case to protect my son and myself.
Nice.
Yeah.
And was it like all the things that you, cuz I can imagine the court system is just a maze. I mean, it's a maze, I'm sure. Plus, there's so many broken pieces. I mean, we know.
Yeah.
We know the stories that you hear about all of this. I mean, that
Yeah.
you've lived through and that other people have lived through. So you felt like it really helped to inform you and bring you there in like a with a greater capacity to really understand what it is that you could do.
I would say primarily the biggest thing that most survivors tell me that I hear, and that was my personal experience as well. When I filed for divorce,
Mhm.
naively believed that the family court system would protect my son and me and that they would just see it, right? It was so obvious. The abuse was overt and insane. The family court judges who sit on the benches are wildly undertrained or not trained at all in dynamics of domestic violence. They see domestic violence is what we traditionally view it as the violent incident model of there's physical abuse, there's proof, there's bruises, there's broken bones. They don't understand the vast array of what we call post separation abuse. They don't get it. They don't understand it. They don't understand how it affects children. You can't be a good parent and abuse your child's other parent. It's just not. You, you want your child living, if you're a good parent, you want your child living in a stable home with a very resourced parent who's able to focus their time and attention on raising your child and providing for your child. If you're actively abusing your co parent, that parent does not have the capacity, which is why I didn't work, right? I was like, nope. Plus my son has high needs.
Mhm.
And so yeah, yeah, they just didn't understand it. And also my attorney was fantastic. She's my savior. She helped get us so much protection, but she had never lived the experience of divorcing a malignant narcissist, to be honest. And so there were just aspects she didn't understand. So this program gave me the language to describe what I was experiencing and how my son was being affected in a way that the court could act on it, and how to demonstrate those patterns, and how to do it concisely. These judges are so busy. They're overwhelmed. They don't understand. Their dockets are full from morning until evening. And then the amount of evidence they have to review outside of court time, especially in a case like mine, is just huge. So, it really did give me the tools to protect my son and myself. And, learn how to function in an abusive co-parenting dynamic, which is
Right.
really challenging.
I can imagine, and I mean, you live through it and you get through the hardest times of it and but you are still connected. I mean,
Oh,
that's the
yeah.
thing. There is a connection there that like is very underestimated because that's
Yeah.
something that you're going to be. But so you're at a place now. So
Mhm.
you move into this, you start learning more about it.
Yeah.
You started coaching others a couple of years ago, right? Several years ago.
Yeah, I graduated from that program in October of 2023, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to be a divorce coach. I took the program for myself, for my own case, which a lot of graduates of the program do. And I knew that I wanted to go back to work. I mean, I had had some really interesting, very high responsibility, high consequence jobs with some, Fortune 500 companies. And I loved that work. But the idea after going through what I had been through of going back to work in a normal 9 to 5 setting, like I sort of describe it as shell shock. There are people, and this is of no disrespect to our, military service members, because I have not lived through that, but I sort of describe it that way. They come back from war and they're shell shocked. They're looking around at people just going about their everyday lives like everything is fine. And they just cannot imagine ever getting back to that place. And that's sort of how I felt. I had lived through something so traumatic, and I was like, I don't see how I could possibly go back to work in an office, have water cooler chat, talk to clients like everything is fine. It's not fine. There are so many people still going through the nightmare that I just escaped.
Yes.
I can't leave them behind.
And I was just gonna say, it's like, I mean, when we talk about finding our purpose, and I know that's a very cliche thing that people say, and
Yeah,
I wish there was a different way to put it. But like you stepped into something that you realize, like, I can't unsee this. Like I've
exactly.
seen it and I can't unsee this. So now
Yeah.
what do I want to do? And I can only imagine, like, was there a point where you kind of were like, oh my God, this is what I want to do?
Yeah.
Or was it eventual? Like, did you kind of just gradually start helping people? And then I mean, how did it kind of transform into what you're doing now?
I was really grappling with what I want to do. What do I want to do? And I will say that there's more and more protective parents, right? Which are an abused parent trying to protect a child from an abuser. There are more and more protective parents having positive outcomes in family courts. But sadly, the majority of parents do not have the level of protection that they should and don't have the level of protection that my son and I do. I had a really successful outcome. And I am clear that the coaching program that I went through really gave me the tools. And, I was raised by an attorney. you,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
my mind just sort of works like that based on, growing up my father's daughter. And I just had this aha moment of I had a lot of success. There are other parents that deserve this level of protection. All kids are my kids. All survivors are my people. This is my tribe. I can't leave them behind. I have to go back and I have to help other people. I can't say there was like this one transformative experience or moment, but it was sort of like a million little realizations over time that I was like, this is what I have to do. This
Yes.
is what I have to do. And so I've been coaching ever since.
Oh my gosh, Kat. And the thing that I think is so what's wonderful about what you do now, because I feel like, when we leave the whatever you want to call it, corporate world, the agency world,
Mhm.
you were working on very like complex projects, overseeing lots of people. Like you have a foundation that you've built.
Yeah.
I mean, when you take something that you do now, which is something
Mhm.
you've stepped into, I mean, it's fairly recent. It's within 2 years, right? You've
Yeah.
stepped into something like this. How much more you can expand on what you do
Mm.
as the year like, you just don't know. When you think about, like, legislature and all this stuff, not that you're up there, I mean, I'm not saying, like, you're gonna then be up on the Hill and I mean, that may be something you wanna do.
I actually am involved in the legislative process a little
Okay,
bit.
I was gonna say, I didn't wanna make that assumption because that is a big ball of yarn. Let's just
Sure
put it
is.
that, you know?
It sure
Um,
is.
but it's a testament to, like, you've done really big things.
Yeah.
And so I always feel like when people walk into something like this that starts with that kernel, that seed, all of the things that have brought you to where you are now, it's like, look out because you've got, you know what I mean? You're going to be making something even bigger and bigger out of this, which we don't know what that is, but bless you for the people that get to work with you because that's it's an area of need. It's
Yeah.
obviously a really big area of need. And not only do you know that, but you've lived it. And
Yeah.
that's the part that's really amazing. So what do you do now? So you've got clients that come to you that are men and women, I would imagine.
I do work with both men and women. A lot of female body coaches do not work with male bodied clients. Just like we talk about breast cancer is primarily a female disease, there
Yep.
are men that get breast cancer too. It's very rare
Yep.
compared to the number of women. It's sort of like that with domestic violence as well. Domestic violence is primarily a gender based violence. It's typically men abusing women, but there are men who are on the receiving end of this abuse. a recent ex-boyfriend who was a dear friend, I worked with him for a long time, was a male victim of neglectful narcissistic abuse, and I watched what it did to him and his daughter, and I think if I hadn't seen that firsthand, I don't know that I would have worked with men.
Yeah.
That experience changed me, and what I've come to realize too is the more insidious the abuse, the more traumatic it is to the brain because people don't recognize it, and it's hard to explain, and so the experience of being abused is so traumatic, but the experience of a male domestic violence survivor, victim survivor, that much more traumatic. People don't believe them, or there's like this masculine shame, machismo shame of, oh, she abused you. So there's just so much more that comes with it that's so complex, which is
Yeah.
why I do work with male clients. I have a bit of a screening process just because I'm a woman and I know what the abuse from a man feels like. I'm able to pretty quickly screen women and understand, is this somebody I want to work with? Is this the abuser?
Mhm.
Based on her language and how she's describing the situation. But I have a bit of a different screening process for men that I use. And so I do work with both men and women. Again, there's a lot of coaches that don't, but I do.
This is one thing that comes to mind. When you have people that come to you
Hmm.
and they're looking for help, a lot of them, do you feel like you are needing to help them identify and understand it? Or do they pretty much know what's going on? They just now need help navigating through the system. Because that's, like you said, it can be really insidious where people are like, wait, what is going on?
Yeah.
Is this just a bad divorce? Or is this somebody that is really manipulating me in a really unhealthy way?
I would say a majority of the people who come to me are aware of how bad it is, but
Hmm.
they don't necessarily have the language to describe it. A big part of my coaching, what I do is very holistic. So I'm not an attorney and I'm not a therapist. I'm sort of somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Therapy is great for unpacking things that have happened in the past. Coaching is really great for, I give people specific tools on how to regulate their nervous systems because this really is like activating the trauma response, the fight or flight. And when you're in fight or flight, you're operating from your reptilian brain, which is the oldest part of the brain near the brain stem. And it's like literally like, do I fight? Do I run? Do I fawn? Which is typical, with abusers, right? Like, acting sweet and getting them to, "Oh, I'm so sorry. It's my fault. It's not your fault." Right? That's fawning, which a lot of kids do in the face of abuse. And so what I do is I give them the tools to re-regulate their nervous system to shift them out of that sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight,
Hmm.
into the parasympathetic nervous system. Because when you're in fight or flight, the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking rational part of your brain, is completely offline. And that's the part of your brain you need to be using when you are navigating a highly complex court system, right? When you're trying to like take all the pieces of abuse and all these little patterns of horrible abuse and weave it into a really compelling narrative to explain to these professionals what is happening to you and what kind of protection you need for your child and yourself. That takes a significant amount of strategic planning. And the clients that come to me are just not in that space. They're
Well,
just
and I
not.
was gonna say, because I mean, and you know this, right? When you're in the midst of it, you're in the midst of it,
Yeah.
and you cannot see to the outside. It's a
No.
very so that's a really that would be a really interesting interplay that you have to navigate with them to kind of get them to a place of not that you're trying to have them like be outside of the experience, but
Hmm.
there's a disconnection there that needs to happen to some degree if you're that emotionally involved.
Yeah.
It's logic doesn't always win when that
Yes.
happens, right?
Oh, not at all. And our
Yeah.
brains don't understand the difference between there's a bear in the room
Yes.
or there's a bear on the other side of the computer who's constantly typing me nasty grams, and it just doesn't get it. And so, I mean, what I do is really holistic, right? So it's like nervous system regulation, giving them tools for this is how we communicate with an abuser, or this is how we document the abuse. These are the three things I need you to do between now and the next time we meet to make sure that things are moving along and we're putting safety in place. And then literally, like, helping them build their case for their attorney. Like, I have clients color code their documentation by the list of best interest factors that family court judges view all cases through. It's sort of like the lens of what do I need to know to protect these people. And so it's very strategy based. It's very legally based. Aptitude test when I was a teenager said that I should either be a lawyer, be in marketing, or I can't remember what the other one was, but I've basically done both of
You
those
did
things,
it both right.
And so
See, that's good. You're living them out. You're living out
exactly.
what you're supposed to be doing. I this is fascinating to me though because when you talk about it almost like a templated version of things, I think that's the part that I just think there's so much more to what you're doing now that is gonna I feel like it's gonna expand. So what do you do? So what's up next for I mean, I know you do lunch and learns, right? You had mentioned that. So tell us about your lunch and learns.
Yeah, I see clients individually. I also do a twice monthly lunch and learn series. Sometimes it's once a month. It sort of depends what I've got going on in my personal life with my
Yeah.
little kiddo.
Yeah.
But it's an hour with experts from all different kinds of fields to help us sort of navigate the journey, ground our bodies, heal, strategy wise. And so I've had attorneys, I've had therapists, nutritional coaches, just to give us the tools that we need to navigate this complex journey because it really does take a village to survive and navigate a high conflict divorce. And so this is meant to be the village, and it's lovely. It's free. You can sign up on my website, and it's lovely. I'm also going to be launching a workshop series, so once a week for 4 weeks. It's a lower price point, for because I really do want to help everybody, right, as much as I can, which is why I do these free lunch and learns. It's at a lower cost than private coaching on specific topics. Like my first workshop is going to be on documentation, which is basically how you document the incidents of your case to present it to family court judges. And so I'm going to be launching that soon. So yeah, that's some stuff going on. I just participated by providing testimony for a bill that we are trying to push through the Colorado court system to provide more safety and protection for family court, domestic violence victims. There's a bill that I would like to bring from California here to Colorado about preventing litigation abuse, which is where abusers weaponize the family court system to just take us back to court over and over and over and over again. So, yeah, lots on the horizon, a lot to be excited about.
You're doing some amazing and really important work. I mean,
Oh,
I hope that and when we look at the arc, let's talk
hmm
about your arc. So, like, you think of the arc of your career right now. Do
hmm
you feel like when you look back on what you've learned, and I know it's a different focus, right? But
yeah,
I feel like, are there things that you're bringing forth with you? Like you said, you've got the lawyer in you because of your dad. I speak this, I have an attorney as a father too. I kind of get it. It's like we
yeah,
sort of, there's a little gene that like
totally.
that we carry with us. But is there something that you feel you have pulled forward kind of into this new space
Oh,
with you?
yeah. I mean, my marketing background, right? I'm a small business owner.
Yes.
I'm a solopreneur, right? So my
Yes.
marketing and my tech background, I built my whole website. I
Yeah.
do the
Yeah.
marketing, social media,
Right.
the strategy, right? All of it.
Yeah.
Launching these products, right? Because I launched TD Ameritrade advertising campaigns nationally.
Right.
So,
Right. Yes.
all of it. My art teaching background, my
Yes.
teaching background of I taught in Commerce City, Colorado, where, people would always say, why middle school and why Commerce City? Because this is where I feel like I can do the most good. There's real opportunities. Yes, it's challenging, but it's sort of the same. And so, yes, everything that I've done in my past careers, I bring to my present. And then, I like to say that my ex husband gave me two things: my son and an education on running a small startup, solopreneur business. I had no idea how to do it. I didn't have the confidence. When he poached me, I was like, really? You want me to do that? And what I learned is it's actually not as hard as you think it is. And
It sounds terrifying.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
yes, but courage is, continuing to act in the face of fear, right? That's what courage is. I had no idea what I was doing. I was totally terrified. And I was like, well, let's just see how it goes, one mistake at a time. And I think that's what people don't realize is that my son and I were in the car today, and something came up about making mistakes. And we looked up the number. And I think that the adage is that Thomas Edison figured out 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb before he made a light bulb, right? And he just learned from every mistake. That's sort of what it is to be a solopreneur, entrepreneur. You figure it out as you go along. And even when you make mistakes, you can't really muck it up that badly.
But I love your take on this, Kat, because I feel like, there are a lot of challenges that people have in life.
Mhm.
And you have kind of come out the other end of this, not only with a perspective on it, because you still, after all that you've been through, and it's trauma. I mean, let's be honest, let's
Yeah,
call it what it is.
yeah.
You still have it in you to say, you know what though, there's certain things that I was given through this too. Like there was some takeaways from this that could I have, learned them in different ways and maybe not gone through all of it? Sure. But
Mhm.
I think that perspective is what makes you even more powerful with
Mm.
the people that you're working with.
Yeah,
Because that's how you view life, right? You
yeah,
view life in that through that angle. And when you're looking at it through that lens, people start to realize, okay, there's silver lining in everything that we do. And there's also a lot of lessons that we can bring forth and then do even more good,
yeah,
which is just,
yeah.
it's pretty amazing.
Well, I think that's really helpful too, especially for people leaving the toxic environment of the corporate world, right? Yes, it was toxic, but the lessons that you learned in that environment shape your entire perspective about who you are and what you do. So I'm highly spiritual. I'm not religious, but I'm very, very spiritual. And I do believe in the journey of souls. And I believe that my soul consciously chose this journey for a reason. And my son did as well, and I believe that we are here. I was meant to live this path to help other people, to bring other people into safety. And it was highly traumatizing. And my abuser is what I call him. I don't dance around it. My abuser and my son's abuser is one of my greatest teachers, unfortunately. I never knew I was this strong. I never knew I could be this strong and this much of a fighter and this resilient. Do I want to have to be all the time? Absolutely not. I'm really looking forward to a break. My spiritual guides are telling me that there's resolution coming soon,
You're due.
big time. And so is my son. We
Yes,
both are. But
absolutely.
yeah, this has been such an education. A lot of us say we're forged in fire. And it really is true. I never imagined that I would be doing something this purposeful. This work is so challenging, but it's so rewarding. And that's exactly what I was looking for when I was thinking, like, I want to go back to work, but I can't just sit in a cubicle and do something like I was doing before. It's not that it's not important work. There's a lot of people doing really important work, but this is what I was looking for. This is the feeling and the work that I knew that I wanted. I wanted to know that children and abused parents would be safer because of the work that I was doing. And it's so unbelievably rewarding.
And that's enough said, right? When you think about how it's finding the depth in what you do.
Mhm.
And you needed this. I mean, this is deeper work for you because this is
Yeah,
what you're meant to be doing.
yeah, yeah,
Kat, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you talking with us about all this because not only I think that there's a lot to be learned just in how to identify what you've been through, but also the fact that you're bringing this forward and that you're making significant impact every time you sit down and talk to somebody. And not only that, but it's almost like you're made for this work. I don't know. That's just how I feel talking to you and knowing what your background is. It's like, oh my God, it's like fits like a glove, which is what
yeah,
it's supposed to be about, right?
absolutely. I
That's what
like
it's
to
all
say all
about.
roads led to Quinn. And, this is
Yes.
the path to my purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Kat, well, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to have all of Kat's links in the show notes. So if anybody's interested in connecting, you guys can reach out to her. And just thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you,
for
Noelle.
being with us.
It was a
All right.
pleasure.
That's it for now. Until next time. Thank you for listening to The Change Effect. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review if you enjoyed this episode so more women like you can find us and take their next step toward creating a life they love.